what is actually going to happen over the next 5 years. And well, nobody can predict it 100%. There are a great many signposts and breadcrumbs that we can look at to see where things are going to be. And we're going to pick the year 2030. That seems like a long way away. But really, we were halfway through 2023. So 6.5 years, we'll be in 2030. Where are we going to be at in terms of things like interest rates for home purchases, real estate prices? What about employment? Are AI programs going to take over jobs? And while those may seem like far away type examples, it's really not that far away. What are the signs that show what the truth is going to be? Well, let's first look at EVs. That may not sound like the sexiest subject to look at, but electric vehicles may be more of a factor than you think. And so, what's happening with EVs is that the government is really trying to put weight behind it. And it may not be as obvious as it seems. You know, they have um, incentives for electric vehicle buyers, such as $5,000 or $7,000 when you buy one, but that's small potatoes. That's chump change. Ford got 9.2 billion from the government to develop EVs. Why is the government giving Ford $9.2 billion? Well, the reason why is because they're also giving orders on how to use it. The government is telling Ford, here's 9 billion, but now we control you. How do they control them? Well, they're getting 9.2 for battery plants, and even the Wall Street Journal says it's an investment in quotes. This is something where the government is using private sector to get results for what they want. What is the result that they want? Well, they want EVs to be ubiquitous. Many states have already said by 2030 they want every vehicle to be electric. And this is taxpayer money to fuel its government mandated electric vehicle transition. It's right there. It's documented. So there's no new investment going into gasoline vehicles. Even as long as 2 years ago, we reported that no new engineering is being done for gasoline engines at the big three: Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, Chrysler. All of the new engineering was going to EVs. So yeah, they're going to be building gas engines, but just whatever is already in existence. They're not building anymore. So according to this article, Ford isn't in danger now, but they lost 3 billion on EVs last month. So this 9 billion is chump change. That's 3 years. That won't even get into 2030. Hopefully by then they will do better than a negative 100% operating margin, right? It means they lost more than they sold. Buyers of Ford's profitable and popular gas-powered trucks are subsidizing EVs. Well, if the government wants Ford to not sell gas-powered trucks, Ford says, fine, but we need subsidized money from somewhere else. Where? 9.2 billion from the government. You see how this is going? You can connect the dots very, very easily for what's going to happen. What does that mean for you? You need to plan on a life where you're driving an EV. Even if you don't want to buy one now, you may think that I'll just go buy a gas engine vehicle. In 5 years, you may not be able to. By 2030, you may not be able to. So put a charging port in your garage now. Start planning for a lifestyle decision process around having an EV and see where that goes. Next, well, people will always want to talk about their retirement, right? They did a survey. How much money you need to retire comfortably. And this is something where people have a big difference of opinion. Obviously, if you make more money, you think that you are going to need more money, right? If you have a low income, you may not need as much. But the consensus was that you need about $1 million, about $1.25 million to retire comfortably. And, that may be a pretty good guess. If you retire at age 65 and you want to live another 20 years till you're 85, that's maybe cutting it short. Most people are going to live longer. 1.2 million Might not be enough. If you take 1.2 million divided by 20 years, that's only about $60,000 a year, right? Most people make more than that now. So you're going to have to cut your lifestyle. What's the bigger problem? The average retirement account stands at 89,000, right? So people think they need 1.2 and they have not even 10% of that. Have about 7% of that or less, really. So getting to retirement is a big deal. We've talked before about how retirement is probably less about savings. You can't save your way into retirement. It's really about income. And you don't need to save up necessarily 1.2 million if you have some income coming in, like a pension or some revenue. Now, companies don't have pensions anymore, but you can create your own pension. You can create something that generates $4,000 or $5,000 a month that will remain once you retire, by having some alternate income for your lifestyle. It's also very important to do that because employment's going to change. Here's an article about just one industry. This happens to be the um, the advertising industry, and advertising agencies are going to replace 7% of jobs by AI by 2030. Okay. Well, that's probably a good representation. There are some industries that maybe will have higher, some will have lower, but either way, 7% of jobs are going to be taken away by AI by 2030. That's 6 years away. How is that going to affect the last thing, retirement? Well, if you're saving for retirement and you need another $1 million, but your job is threatened by AI, you may not be able to get a raise or make a lot more money than you have been, because AI works for free, basically. How does that strike you? Interest rates on real estate. This is a big one. A lot of people think that, well, rates are high now, they're going to go back down, because most people are used to single digit interest rates. You're used to rates of 2, 3, 4%, maybe 5%, because that's really what existed for the last decade plus 15 years, really. From 2008 on, after the housing crash, rates were basically single digit, 5, 6%. They went down to 2 or 3%. So when they go up to 6 or 7, people think, oh, that's really high. They have to come back down. Well, here's a real estate investment company that's projecting the interest rate for 5 years. And they're saying that, well, in 2023, 7 to 8. Well, that's where we are now. What about 2024? They're talking 10%. And you might think, well, gee, that sounds kind of high. Is it going to be that significant? 10% is really not out of whack for historical levels. Here's a historical chart. Here's the 10% line, right? For most of history, it was at around 10% in the recent history. This is 1986. This is going back to the 70s. It was up 15, 18, almost 20%. Now we gradually went down in the 90s and 2000s, right? But that was kind of an unusual scenario. Even if you go here, when's the last time it was below 7%? Really, 1993, going back to the 70s, was 9%, 20 some odd years. And the economic conditions back in those times were very similar to now. You had inflation, you had a possible recession, you had a lot of social upheaval. Those are all the same things that were happening in the 70s, anybody who remembers, and it spiked up. So this investment company is predicting 24 will be 10, 2025 will be 15. Could that be true? 2026 will be 16. Could that be true? Well, who knows if it's going to be true or not, but there are reasons to believe that it could be the way the interest rates go. It's certainly not going to be 3%. The Federal Reserve, who sets interest rates for the underlying T-bills and the other government securities, have already said they're going to pause temporarily for the rest of this year. There won't be any more raises for 2023. What does that imply? That maybe there'll be more interest rates going up in 24 and beyond. And that's what they're talking about here with these historical rates. What about home prices? What's going to happen with home prices? Well, people are looking at home prices the same way as interest rates. When are they going back down? When are they going back down? Well, home prices never really have ever gone down. Sure, we had the housing crash in 2008, 2009, and they went down a little bit. But if you really look at charts, they didn't go down that much, and they didn't stay down for too long. So if you take home prices and you say they're going to go up, even if they go up 3% a year, 3% a year, which isn't all that much. That's less than the rate of regular inflation right now. Regular inflation right now is about 4%. And if you say real estate is going to go up less than inflation, that would be a big ask. Well, 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but between now and 2030, that's 7 years. So 3 times 7, that would be 20%, but it's worse than that because the 3% compounds on prior years. So with compound interest, it gets a lot worse. How much worse are we talking about? Well, let's take a look at a compound interest calculator. If you have a house that's right now $460,000, that's the median price of a house right now, roughly. And you take 7 years of appreciation at 3% interest rate, compounded annually. That house is going to be $565,000 in 2030. Now, that's $100,000 increase in price by 2030 on the same house. It's very likely that the increase will be more than that because the market still is underfunded with inventory. There's not enough inventory to go around. And if you have too many people chasing too few houses, the appreciation might be more than 3%. If you maybe even made this 5%, which would be about the same as inflation. Look at this. This puts it at 647. That's 100,000 more by just increasing the appreciation. We're not talking interest rate. This is a calculator for investments, but it does the same thing. So if you have a 460 house over the next 7 years until 2030, and real estate appreciates 5% per year. Look, you get more than 5% on a CD now. So why wouldn't real estate go up that much? That house is now going to be 647, 650 roughly. It went up 200 grand. So compounded interest can make a big difference with what's going to happen with the real estate market. And inflation is not showing any signs of abating. Sure, we may have a crash because maybe people want to bail out of their houses, but nobody's really financially distressed at this point. People have low interest rates, or they've been hunting around for a house for a long time and never really got what they wanted. So there's a few predictions for 2030. Let's bookmark this and come back in a few years and see where we're going. Put your comments below. Let us know what you think. And that'll be it for Friday.